All right. Hi, everyone. How's it going today? Ooh, exciting. All right. I caught you off guard. Hi, everyone. How's it going today? Awesome. Well, my name's Wes Fleming. I'm going to be getting us going here about our presentation called Up in the Air with Airtable. Just a little bit about me real quick. So I'm an instructional designer associate over at Ed Plus with the ID&M team. And I'm mainly working on the Dreamscape project. And Airtable is just something that we started using for various things. And then I was asked to help present it here at the data conference. So here I am. They'll introduce themselves here in a minute, but I'm here with Jason, Shelly, and Michael. And so they'll all be coming up here in a moment. All right, so just our agenda today real quick. I'm going to mainly be talking about what is Airtable. Not everyone's super familiar with it, and those that are sometimes too. It's good to know exactly what it is and what it's good at, and so that'll kind of be a big part of our conversation today, is just seeing what if Airtable is the right fit for you. And then we're going to get into use cases, and then we'll share some resources and have time for questions at the end. So what is Airtable? So Airtable is a hybrid of a spreadsheet and a database. And so it's good to think about it. It can do either of them, but it's not going to do either of them as well as just the solo product could do. And we'll talk more about that here in a sec. It's a collaborative tool that allows for one source of truth. It's a tool that can create the customized work that users can create their customized workflows in. And then a big thing to remember is right now, if you're going to be trying, if you want to experiment with Airtable, is there is a $240 charge per year per user. And so even though it is an enterprise account, this is definitely something you want to be mindful of. So my recommendation would be, if you do want to just experiment with Airtable, maybe try using your personal email address or another account, and you can easily create a free account and you can just see some of its basic functionality or mess around with it. So just a key thing to keep in mind there. So you're not surprised like a lot of us were when all of a sudden we were all using it and then we learned, oh, it's going to charge us $240 for this. And so just a heads up. So here I have a little video that Airtable made, and it's just kind of a good introduction of how it could be used.
There's a million things to keep track of. Characters, scenes, plot points, the equipment, the location, the filming permits. Between you and me, this picture was really on the skids. My ideas were maybe a little too ambitious. Oh, go away! I don't have time for this! But then we started using Airtable. It's a tool that lets you organize anything. A wedding, a company, an empire, whatever. We're using it for our movie. Glomax is my follow-up for my movie Reservoir Puppets. I use it to scout for the inventory. I attach photos of everything, and they're automatically stored in the cloud. Sticks? Check. Cheese plates? Check. Apple boxes? Check. Cookies? Check. It helps me keep track of all my characters and their backstories, not to mention last-minute ideas from the director. Y'all went to the same Airtable, but I see what I want to see in Photon Bullet. No matter what your project is, Airtable puts all your stuff, people, and ideas in one place. So we can focus on making the movie exactly the way I envisioned it. The way I envisioned it. Thank you.
I'm sorry for all the gross things I did to your universe.
Apology accepted, Glomax, eater of worlds.
Let's roll one. Airtable. Organize anything you can imagine.
All right, set, rolling.
And action.
All right, so I think that video it does a really good job just showing a use case for Airtable, some of its functionality. And for this particular meeting, we're not going to get really too much into all the specifics it can do. We're mainly going to kind of do a broad flyby of it and just kind of give a general idea of some of our use cases. So to kind of get us going, I was, while we were kind of thinking of our presentation, we noticed that we all have very different viewpoints of Airtable. So for me, for example, like I love it. I think it's an awesome tool, can do so many different things. And again, I'm not much of a data person. If we were looking at like the data scale, I would be like an apprentice or kind of a tier 1 or tier 2 person. And then we have some actual like data knights on our team or data masters. And when they look at Airtable, they see a very different picture than what I would see. And so I was trying to think of a way to kind of best describe this as someone that's never used Airtable before. So I came up with this analogy. So how many of you have seen the Great British Bake Off or have heard of it, familiar with it? Okay. So within it, they have competitions. One of the competitions is called the technical challenge. And basically all they do in this competition is the judges will give the bakers or the competitors a very vague recipe. I think one of the latest ones was like make cheesecake, period. That's all they get. They don't get any kind of use this amount of flour or anything like that. And so this is kind of like what it's like when you're using maybe like an SQL database or some other database that's not Airtable. You get these very big directions. So for this example, I made big directions for making chocolate babka. Again, make the filling with the hazelnuts, make the dough, proof the dough, bake until done. For someone like me that's not a data master, I would have no idea where to start with this. I would make the filling with the hazelnuts. I don't know what that means. I've made chocolate chip cookies before, and so I'm good at that. And so I would probably start trying to make this into a chocolate chip cookie recipe. Whereas you have data masters, and they're gonna be able to do a lot more with this. So we have kind of two personas here that we're gonna give these vague directions to. We have your database Diana, and again, these are like your data knights, your data masters, wizards, data wizards. And so database Diana, she has a data background, tons of experience, SQL, spreadsheets, you name it, she knows it. And so when she gets this recipe for chocolate babka, she has a very clear picture of what she wants to do. And then you have educator Ed, which would be me. So I'm like a, an apprentice or someone very low on the data scale. I'm techie. I can work around a spreadsheet and do some formulas and be a little fancy, and I have some problem solving skills, but I've never heard of babka, possibly like, no idea what it is when I got that recipe, but I do love chocolate chip cookies. So what we're gonna do is we'll look at what happens when you give this vague direction to these two people. We look and we see what database Diana made. It looks amazing. You can see all the different layers there. It's very shiny. She even plated it very well. And it's just a beautiful thing to look at. And it probably tastes wonderful because she knows her way around a database. She knows what she's expecting. And she knows like different functionalities and ways to customize the database to make it something really useful and impactful for users. And then you have me, educator Ed over there. I ended up with chocolate chip cookies. Not at all what we were trying to make. Might be able to get the job done, or at least that one instance, but it's not something that's going to be scalable. It's not going to be something that users are going to actually be excited about, especially when the goal was chocolate babka. So I would have failed this technical challenge in the Great British Bake Off because they would have looked at that and be like, well, these are cookies. Sorry. But now let's look at what happens when we make a database with precise directions. Again, making a chocolate babka, I can only fit in like the top 3 directions for this, but you can see it's very detailed. Preheat the oven, tip the hazelnuts into a baking tray, place the butter and sugar, and it gives detailed steps that really make it so you know exactly what you're doing. And this is kind of what it's like using Airtable with. So again, we're going to give these vague direction or these precise directions to our database Diana and our educator Ed, and we're going to see what they each make. And look at that, they both made a pretty good looking chocolate babka. Database Diana's is not nearly as fancy as the original one she made. Doesn't have all the customization, probably didn't really wow the judges. And she even might have gotten frustrated along the way of making it because she couldn't customize it the way she originally thought she would be able to. Educator Ed, on the other hand, he's ecstatic. He actually made a chocolate babka without ever hearing about it before. And he loved working in Airtable because he didn't really have to know much about data or databases or all these other programs. Airtable's precise directions allowed him to come out with a chocolate babka. And so this is kind of something to think about depending on your level with databases. Are you more of a database Diana? You know what a database could do, and you have a mindset and you have a goal of what you're aiming for? Or are you more towards like an educator Ed, where you're not really sure what a database is capable of or what's a good database versus that bad database, but you still want to try to get your feet wet and experiment with it? So when you're thinking about using Airtable, kind of think about what's already your knowledge base and what do you expect it to do? And the last thing I want to say here before I hand it off is a lot of people compare Airtable to just a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet. And the core view of it, so this is in Airtable called the grid view. And this is kind of where like the heart of Airtable lives. And it looks very similar to a spreadsheet. But there's one key difference here. So just like in a spreadsheet, you have your rows and your columns, but here in Airtable, all the columns here are called fields. And so unlike a spreadsheet, each field can only be one thing. So if you say a field's going to be a number, all that field ever is going to be in that entire column is a number. Like here, for example, I made this field right here is an attachment field. I can't put any text in that box. All I can do are attach files. The field on the far right there is a date field. Again, all I'm ever going to put in there is dates. So this is a key difference for people that are coming into Airtable thinking it's going to act like a spreadsheet. It's not, because in a spreadsheet, it's kind of like a blank canvas. You can paint all over the place. You can put colors in random boxes and do whatever you want, and you can make some really cool stuff. In Airtable, very structured, not very many not lots of freedom to do whatever you want, because Airtable needs that structure in order to function as a database in order for you to be able to use some of its really cool features. So again, that's just a really high level overview of Airtable, kind of what it is versus a database and how it's different than a spreadsheet. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jason, and he's going to talk to you about one of his use cases and about something he tried to build in Airtable.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Peters. I'm a data analyst with the Ed Plus data analysis team, aka a database Diana. So nice to meet everybody. Can I just get has anyone used Airtable before? So a little, like kind of half and half. Okay. So I'm going to kind of run through one of the use cases that I have. A spoiler alert, it's not going to be a nice, pretty present at the end. It's actually an ongoing project. And this is kind of a way to demonstrate like an interaction or experience with Airtable. So it's not necessarily going to be everyone's experience, but in my use case, this is kind of a showcase of what that looked like and kind of how I went about looking at some pieces of what we needed. So I was approached to take a look and help our HR and culture team with some of their tracking. And so this is where they keep track of all of their vacant positions, their lines, who replaced who. This is like their kind of main working sheet that they use within their team and how they kind of stay all on the same page and organized. And so when we started walking through it, some of the needs that arose that they really liked the idea of automations, that they could get a quick email or a notification to people within the team. Perhaps it's outside stakeholders who might have a position open and they can see status changes. That was really kind of a bright kind of spot for them that Airtable could do. They wanted to use it for historical record keeping within Ed Plus. This is kind of their source of truth for who has replaced who in each position, where new positions started. So Airtable, being a relational database, worked out pretty well here. And they also wanted to share the information that they had. So they wanted to maybe create dashboards or some sort of an interface, something that other people can see in a nice, quick, easy view, what's open, what the status is, and just get that little bit of information that they needed. They could not do this in their Google Sheet because of the last point, data validation. So they Couldn't even create a pivot table because in their fields, let's say in the HR partner, there was, Jason, and maybe that wrote JP the next time, then I put J Peters. And so it was sorting through every single line to be able to see if they're even capturing all of their information they wanted to, if they're trying to do a pivot table. So it became almost unusable based on typos and just kind of that unstructured entries that they had. So I like to get in and just set things on fire at first. I will say measure first. When you get that new recipe, don't get into it. I know if I've tried a new one and it's saying, okay, so start cooking your onion while that's going, chop these vegetables. The next thing I know, it smells like burning. All right, that's not good. The onion's burning. I had to turn this off. Where's that other ingredient? I swear I got that at the store last time. It will make your life a lot less stressful if you just kind of measure first, get all your ducks in a row, at least to have an idea of where you want to go, how it's going to look, and how things might interact. The other thing to note with Airtable when you use it is you can have all of your ingredients set out. You can have everything go. Once you get back into the recipe, that recipe can change. Where it said you couldn't use an ingredient before, maybe that ingredient is now available. There's going to be variations. Airtable is a constantly evolving product. So what you can't do today, you might be able to do tomorrow, or you might not be able to do for another year. So you just have to be ready to accept kind of the change in the flow of Airtable as they develop it. So that first piece, and really kind of the biggest question mark for me, was going to be the data validation piece. So I wanted to focus on no code options or minimally complicated formulas. To me, the real benefit of Airtable is you don't have to get in and do the coding options. It's something that anyone can kind of dive into and start using. So I just wanted to focus on things that kind of left those out. Like Wes said, column types have to be determined when you create something. So this is kind of that first step, just like a database. You have to say, what is this? And I think it's a really good start because you don't even get to screw it up from the get-go. You have to kind of have that organization put together. But my question is, once I get that column type, how do I determine what goes into there? And I think it's going to be easy enough. Maybe you could do some simple formulas for like a number to get it go through like 1 to 10, some of those things. But when it comes to like text, which is the things that kind of typically were had errors in this use case, this is kind of some of the questions I had. How am I going to limit what those people can put? Now, this is a picture of Google Sheets here. Excel has the same thing. You can actually take 2 clicks. You're here. It's really kind of minimal in the formulas you can provide. It's kind of a drag, select. And so this is available in other options. This is not available in Airtable. So this does not exist there. So as I started to look through to see like, how are we going to do this? Let's just go ahead and bring in some of our data. We have HR data around. We can kind of use that as our framework. If I can bring in, I say, hey, Jason, if I'm replacing Jason, I can know what his title is. I can know what his department. I can have all of these other pieces of information and I can bring that over. Maybe we can use that in automations. Maybe we can use it for validation. This is maybe one way we can make their life easier. So talking to Wes, there's a number of different ways you can get your data into Airtable. The one that I decided to experiment with here, because I thought it was kind of interesting, was the email. So I kind of had an Alteryx workflow set up to where I had a pretty simple SQL query, brought it in email, and sure enough, right up, it worked pretty well. You can kind of see where they have the column types at the top. Did a pretty decent job there. There's a few that when they popped up, I would probably choose something else. For example, I think it was like the hire date came up as a single select. Maybe I just want to choose that as a date. So I just made a screenshot here. So these are going to be a list of all of the different formats you can do. So if you're going to have an email, it is nice to know that you can't have anything other than an email. It's a great first step to eliminating some of those errors. So with this information, you can kind of also see a little bit at the top. So you can have different tables you can work off of. So this is the data, and I thought, okay, let's create a working table that we can use this. One of the key features of Airtable, I think, are the linking records. So I thought, okay, let's use this, and we can and link what we have in the database to what their working sheet is going to be. Again, I would pay attention to the relationships that you're creating when you start linking records. If I have our HR partners here and I have all of our open positions and I want to say, I want to be able to choose which HR partner is working on a certain position. I can do that. And I can say, maybe John is going to work over here. Debbie's working on this one. When I link those records come married at that point. And so without doing anything, there's going to be an additional field that pops up in my HR partners, and it's going to list out every position that they're working on. So when I link records, they really, truly are doing what they're called, and they get linked. And I'll kind of skip to the bottom where linking is not referencing. You don't reference or suggest something in a different table. You truly kind of bring that record and that row, that information, you can link it over there. So the other thing to think about this is, if this is going to be a user kind of aspect, is primary keys, that unique kind of identifier that's going to mention each row. Well, when I bring in some HR data, an EMPL ID is a great primary key. If I'm an HR partner and I'm trying to figure out where Jason is to replace him, searching through EMPL IDs, not a great user experience. So it's one of those things. It's like, what could we find that's going to do the job, be unique? But in this case, how can we also make it user friendly? And because it just links and it's not really referencing, it's kind of limited into the amount of validation it can provide. If it's not exactly what that says, there is no changing it. There's no editing it. So at that point, you're kind of stuck with what you have. So it's either an all or nothing option. So at this point, I go, okay, well, maybe these things are going to be needed to change. Some may be more often than not, but we need that flexibility. So what else can I do? Okay, so one of the fields is a single select. Okay, let's do that. And I thought maybe we'll just create like on a column type. I can just use the department column, and I can take all of the records from that column, and let's put that into a single select. Well, you can't do that. That's not possible. So I said, okay, so how am I going to get a single select without hand keying every single department at ASU? I thought, okay, well, we can use some of these automations. So we'll start kind of creating this. I said, okay, so if this record matches this condition where they're HR and culture, these are all of our possible partners. All right, so let's find those people. And then we're going to create a new record in this other table with all of our HR partners. And we're going to create this dimension table that has all of our HR partners here. Okay, so that's good. Okay, find out it's not checking this all the time. It's only when a record is created or updated. So I've already put this in here. Okay, so now I need to find another kind of like a status that might change, that can change this. It got real messy real quick. And then I was worried about duplication. It just wasn't a great solution. But this is kind of indicative of some of the experience in Airtable where it can work seamless, or you're going to kind of head off down a rabbit hole trying to find your workaround, see if you can get something to work. And then lo and behold, next time I come back, now I can create a new table based on a column. So if there's a piece of information that you maybe started off with, which was of minimal importance, and then it kind of grows, you want to add more pieces in a new table, it's very easy. 3 clicks away, and you've got yourself a new table. And if you wanted to create dimension tables, this would be a really easy way to do this. So this is kind of meant to show you an experience of starting with one question and how you're probably going to have experiences where you're going to have to find a workaround. This isn't what I want. You're going to have to get creative. So if you're looking for a one-stop shop where everything's just there for you, probably not the case. You're going to want to have to dive in, get your hands dirty. And you're also going to want to pay attention to those update emails every week. There's a lot of really good stuff that comes out, but you can also find out that your headaches can go away very quickly. And you can have other ways to kind of solve problems. So like I said, this is not kind of an end product. This is kind of to show some of the ways that Airtable data validation works, doesn't work, some of the ways that you're going to kind of run in and experience and interact with the product. Shelly does have a more kind of complete picture to look of how we use it in other ways.
Hi, my name is Shelly Segal, and I'm also with EdPlus. And I have been with ASU for 9 years now, started in admissions, and now I'm a database Diana. So I am going to talk about the term of the week. We have a data literacy program going at EdPlus. And one of the things we wanted to do is get everybody on the same page, which is really easy here because everybody has the same definition. all over the university. So we're at least trying it at Plus. If we put out a term of the week, at least that's what everybody thinks we think that it is. So, so I had to figure out how to track these terms of the week. So I'm going to tell you about the problem, give you my solution, show you how we walk through it, and then give you the pros and cons of how I see Airtable. So the first thing is we have this thing, term of the week. We want to have slides, we want to have approvals, because what I think is the right thing may not agree with my managers. So we wanted to make sure everybody was literally on the same page. So the solution wound up being, we used Airtable. And what you had to do is we have a form that you choose the term, you put in the definition, it then sends an email to Slack, tells the approvers that hey, there's something out here, we want you to look. And then hopefully the approvers will say, yes, we love this, or they send it back to you and say, think again. Hopefully they don't say think again, but let's assume they said, perfect, we love this. And then you actually have to create the slide. Once again, you go to a form and you attach the slide to the form, send it to the approver that says, yes, that looks gorgeous, I can't think of anything better. And then eventually this goes out to Slack. Surprisingly, once a week. So to do this, I created 3 tables. The main table that holds all the definitions and the slides. I have an owner table because we want to know who's actually putting this together. And an update table, which you have to use to actually update the records, which was one of my frustrations. So one of the things I want to talk about is that we have a number of automations to get all this information to whoever needs to know. We have an automation to send the information to the approver sends something back to the developer. And so this goes back and forth, which is why you have a number of automations that we're going to use. So the first thing you do, like I said, is you choose a term. You choose the owner. That was that extra dim table that Jason was talking about that you can create. And select the status. When the status needs approval, then an automation will trigger. When that triggers, there's a message that goes to Slack, which is really kind of lovely. Get the little highlight. So all the approvers know there's something to look at. And as you can see, something's available. We give you the link. And the link shows you all the records that need approval. And in this is a gallery view, which is really quite useful to get an idea of everything that's available on the records. And in this case, the approver is going to click on this to go to the exact definition that you need to deal with. One of the issues that I have is that on the form, the pre-fills are painful unless you use an extension. And we can talk about that in a bit. But the slide does not attach as a pre-fill. So that's why I have this gallery, so they can actually see the slide, they can click on the slide, and they can actually read the slide. So once it comes to the approver, and like I said, the form needs to be pre-filled. So there's not a mechanism in Airtable that will automatically help you pre-fill. You actually have to go to what they call an extension. This extension is built by Airtable, but even within some of the pre-filling, you still might have to do some coding yourself, especially if you want to update records on a different table. which took me a little bit of Googling to figure out how to update, because in my mind, you would automatically be able to update, but they don't think the way I do, apparently. All right, so the approver said, this is wonderful. And we're going to send the developer a link. Jason's gotten at least 4 of them. It fills in the form, it runs the automation. It's that you've added your new slide. It says needs approval. Once again, it goes to the approver. This is just the information that we're adding. The approver is a pre-filled form again. And finally, after all that work, we have all the terms of the week, what the definitions are, who was the approver, who was the person that actually wrote it up, and life is good. The only thing I had to do was go in and say, okay, what week is this going to actually go to Slack? And ta-da! This is what you'll see once a week, maybe not this one. We got a mechanism to work. One of the issues I had is there is an automation to go to Slack, but it only put out a link and it didn't actually put out my slide. So we figured out a workaround, which is very messy, that I send a record to Google Sheet. Then Alteryx runs and says, hey, there's a record out there, send it to Slack. So we have an Alteryx sending something to Slack. There might be a better way. I haven't looked into it yet. Like Jason said, like most of Ed Plus, we are flying the plane and building it at the same time. That's true of Airtable. So the pros and cons, the way I see it. So it's wicked easy to create tables. I'm from Boston, so I can say that. It's also wicked easy to create automations within Airtable. You can create very simple charts. I didn't put it in here, but I want to know what the status of the various terms are. So it's very, very simple. It's just one column, one, you can choose one variable on the columns and one variable on the rows. And if you need anything more than that, you're going to be in trouble, at least as of today. Next week, maybe not. Forms are really easy to create. You can just pull the variables in and out. And as I showed you, you can enable views in the web page, which was that gallery view that I showed you a bit earlier. The cons, I've got a few of those. It was like the very fancy babka that I wasn't allowed to make. So for the pre-fill forms, you have to go to extensions. It's not within Airtable itself. The automation to Slack didn't work and I needed a workaround. I had to update records. In my mind, that is a mechanism that should automatically happen. It does not. It takes a little bit of work, but it's within automation, so the world isn't going to end. What I had to do to get the link from Airtable to Google, I started using Zapier. So that's an additional expense. So the automations in Zapier, I think you can get one actual movement, and then you have to start paying. So again, there's an additional expense. And it's not easy to aggregate on the records. There is a way to do some roll-ups, but not the way I wanted to do it. So there are workarounds, and we're working on all of them. So I am going to pass this on to Michael Miller, and he will talk about more of the reporting side or the interfaces.
Hey, good morning. So thanks, Shelly. My name is Michael Miller, and I have a weird title. So I'm an academic success and retention specialist, which doesn't mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But I work on the Ed Plus instructional design and new media team. And so what I do in my role So I partner with a lot of the different functions, especially within Ed Plus, but around the university, that are looking to see how can we enhance the student experience, both inside of courses, as well as their journey in between courses, right? So one of the things that I was really excited about with Airtable, and again, thanks to Wes for getting us all addicted to it, is something called interfaces, which I'm going to talk about it here for a little bit, but I kind of call it dashboard for dummies. Because for me, I like Wes, I'm an educator ed, right? So I like data, I like it a lot. I really love playing with it and analyzing and then being able to tell stakeholder stories with data, but I am not a database data. I'm not able to go in and pull those things for myself. So with the Airtable interfaces, there's 4 kind of templates that they'll give you when you're starting to build. So on the left here is the record review. This is where you're able to review the details of many records from one table. So it's going to give you a really good high-level overview of a lot of things that are going on in one spot. You can also do the record summary. That's going to give you a detailed overview of one single record. So again, if you have a really in-depth record, that's a really good view to be able to build out. Forms, we've already talked about that a little bit, but you're able to create the new records in a base. And then what I'm going to spend my little bit of time on today is the dashboard. So this is where you're able to create a high-level view of your data using summaries and charts. So like I said, dashboards for dummies. So that's not slide on me or anybody else, but I will not be able to go into Tableau today and build a dashboard that I can share with my stakeholders. But again, because I work with so many different people across the university, it's really important that we do have a central story that we're able to share with all of those people who are contributing to the work. And so that's why I came to Airtable. Now, I wanted to talk before we get into all the fun things about it. I wanted to talk about some of the restrictions. And again, kind of going back to our food analogy, I did mac and cheese. I love cheese. I don't love sweets quite as much, but I love savory food. So you can do Kraft mac and cheese right from the blue box, and it'll fill you up. But you're going to be limited, right? And it's maybe not the tastiest thing, and it's not going to do all the fun, fancy things versus a homemade gourmet mac and cheese, right? We can get to have custom homemade pasta, do a mix and blend of cheeses. You can put bacon bits on top. I mean, you can just go to town with that thing, right? And it's awesome. But again, for those of us who are not culinary experts, the Kraft mac and cheese is a safe way to be able to fill our stomachs, right? And so for me, that's the Airtable interface. It's a very safe way to be able to tell a story with data, but you're not going to be able to go as far as a database Diana would and something like Tableau. So a couple of caveats. So the first one you can see, I've marked it out because from the time that I created this presentation to today, it is no longer in beta mode. So we've already talked quite a bit about how fast Airtable is able to push out changes. So again, this is one of those interfaces was in beta mode for a long time. So I just told people, hey, what's here today, maybe gone tomorrow, don't fall in love with anything. Now you can feel free to fall in love because I'll only likely be adding and editing going from there. So one of the complications at the beginning was sharing. So when it was in beta mode, if you wanted to share your dashboards with stakeholders, you also had to share your base, which if you are I want to say control freak, but if you're a control freak like me, that can be a little scary, right? Giving people access to all of the data when I really just want to give them a very high level overview of what's happening. But now that it's no longer in beta mode, we have a new share function where you are able to share just your dashboard with people and not have to give them access to your whole base. So for the control people out there like me, it helps us sleep a little bit easier at night. I'm also a designer, so I want to talk about design restrictions and colors. So I'm going to show you a couple of different interfaces I built here in a minute, and you're going to think that I'm obsessed with pastels and Easter egg hunts. That's not the case. It's just the way that Airtable has customized their colors for me. Now, they do have a range of different color schemes you can pick from, but you can't create custom color schemes. So for me, again, anything I do, I want to have it ASU branded, if I'm passing along to other people, and we can't really do that here. For my data friends out here, so one of the restrictions is how customized you're able to get with your filters. So as an example, one of the things that I do with my teams is we send out a pre-course email to students, letting them know your course is open. Here's the top 3 things you need to do to set yourself up for success. However, at ASU, we don't always start our sessions on a Monday or a Sunday. Sometimes they start on a Wednesday or a Friday. It just kind of changes all the time, right? So if I need to give my stakeholders, here's the week 1 participation, here's week 2, so on and so forth, I needed to roll on a 7-day cadence. But again, at the time that this was built, if you're doing a week filter, it's only going to be by the calendar week. So it's only showing me Sunday through Saturday. Whereas again, if our session starts on a Wednesday, I need to see Wednesday through Tuesday. So again, just some of those restrictions. Again, you can do a lot of fun things with it. You can, use your box of Kraft and cheese. You can put some bacon bits on top, but you can't go, all the way in with some of the more specialized things you could do in, Excel or Tableau. So let's talk about the building blocks. So setting up your first interface. So it all starts with a base, and that's what my three colleagues have been talking about today, are the different things you can do with bases. So this is one base or example of the base that I built. Also wanted to talk about importing. How do you get the information into it? So we've talked about a couple of different ways, but if you're trying to take a really big report and then get that into Airtable, so then you can build a dashboard, a few different ways you can do that. They have an extension where you can upload a CSV file. The challenge with that is that sometimes you have to manually map each field. And so for one of my tables, there's a lot of fields. And so to manually map each one of those, just labor intensive to set it up. You can also import from Excel, Access, Google Sheets, and so forth. Limitation, again, as of today, is that it's a 5 MB import. So if you're dealing with larger files and trying to get those in there, you kind of have to do a little bit of workaround. So the very bottom bullet point there is my cheap man's way of getting this done is copy and paste. But you think about data validation, right? That probably wouldn't fly for a database, Diane. They want to really make sure that all that data is absolutely secure and that it's point on. So we just have to do a little bit of extra validation with that step. So you can get the information into Airtable in a number of different ways. But again, just like we've said all along, sometimes you have to find some creative workarounds to make that happen. So this probably won't be a shocker to anyone who has designed a dashboard before, but just a tip is to always plan your dashboard. Again, knowing that Airtable is going to give you some very basic building blocks and templates, sometimes that can limit the creativity or what you want to do. So if you go in and you start to look at the templates, you're going to build to the template, versus if you go in saying, here's the story that I need to tell, and here's what my stakeholder is interested in, then it kind of empowers you a little bit more, right, to tweak that template to be able to tell the story that you want to tell, rather than designing your dashboard to the template that they provide you. So here's where it starts to get fun. So building the primary filter. So I don't know if that's a technical term, but I call it the primary filter because it lives at the top and it affects all of the records that you put into your dashboard. There are a lot of choices for what you can do here. And again, you can put up multiple different filters within your primary filter. So here you can see that I did a filter to choose is any of with the number of 3 courses. So it's going to pull in all of those. But there's a number of different operators that you can use when you're trying to build out those different filters. But again, it's just not quite as exhaustive as you were working in, Excel or Google Sheets, things like that as well. All right, so then second step is where you start to build your element. So down at the bottom, there's a nice blue button that says add elements. So again, makes it really easy to plug and play. And again, I don't know if there's any designers in the room, but I use Adobe Creative Cloud quite a bit, and they have this really easy version of Adobe Premiere Pro that is very, again, like user-friendly. If you've never used a program, you plug and play things in, but it's going to limit you. Versus an Adobe Premiere Pro, I mean, you can go to the moon. It's literally what they use to produce movies, right? But it takes a lot of time and understanding to get really, really good at that program. This is the kind of, again, the dummy version of doing that, right? So it's going to give you some pre-built elements that you can plug into play, and you can move things and resize them and do some of that type of design, but it is going to limit you just a little bit. So up here at the top left in that gold box, I just highlighted, that's my primary filter that we were just looking at before. So again, that filter, every element that I add into this dashboard now, unless I tell it not to, is going to be linked to that primary filter. But on the right, you can also see in that gold box that within each element, you're able to build additional filters as well. So that's really pulling in, what do you want this block or this pie chart to be able to tell from the data that you already have. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on, what is there and what's not there. But again, just wanted to show a little bit of the elements of building those and getting them into space. All right, so now I've got kind of my counting blocks up at the top, and I'm starting to build my bar chart going across. So up here on the right, just again, showing some elements here. There's a lot of different types of charts, but again, it's going to be limited, right? But you can do a lot of good things as long as you're not trying to share your dashboard with a database Diana, right? Who's going to be like, what is this? There's also on the right, you can see filters. And then as Shelly was saying, you can set customization for your x-axis and your y-axis, but it's also going to be limited. You can pick 1 to 2 things you know, a little bit of filter and customization, but you're not able to go nearly as in depth as you would with other programs. All right, so a completed build. So this is an example of my pre-course email dashboard. So we're tracking over here on the left the number of students who engage leading up to the session start date. Here I'm just some that's shown a different way. And then on the far right, I'm comparing associated grade outcomes, right? So the top one are students who engage before the session start compared to those who engage after the session start. Probably not a big shocker, right? With those grade outcomes there. But what I wanted to highlight here is how a finished dashboard can start to look. So at the top left, you can see next to my primary filter, I've also added some instructions. Again, knowing that we're wanting to share this dashboard with a lot of different stakeholders who are going to want to look at it for different reasons, giving them a little bit of information about what this dashboard is and how to use it can be really helpful. And that is one of the elements that you're able to build within Airtable. You can add text. You can also see very faintly there's some gray lines. So just creating some visual separation between your elements as well. So they do have some design elements in there as well. And then on the top right, again, that's my primary filter that is going to be linked to all of the records that are shown in this dashboard. Now, one thing to know, again, when we talk about here, my pastel color scheme, so I call it the Easter egg. But again, that is one of those limitations, right? So I could choose a different color scheme. This is just the one that's automatically linked to my base. But with that, that's one restriction. And then one of the other restrictions that I found on a lot of these dashboards as well is your y-axis. So it's going to automatically adjust based off of the data that's being pulled in. So right now, this one works because both my y-axes are set at 100, right? So it's a fair visual comparison. However, there are many other times, and especially if I start to change the filters, that my top one may be set to 500 students and my bottom one may be set to 100. And so again, it's telling a story, but it's not really telling a full accurate story. So again, those are the types of things when you are building a dashboard, just to be aware of and to make sure that we're communicating with the stakeholders that we're wanting to share this with, so that we are telling a factual story with the data that we have here. This is just a different view, and I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to wrap up, but just to kind of show a different version. So at the top, now you can see I have 3 primary filters, right? So the top left that's in the gold box, that's going to be linked to the bar chart in the gold box, as well as this first set here. My black is a second set of filters, and then my maroon is a third set of filters. This is cropped, but below here would be a exact kind of replication of this linked to my black and to my maroon. So what's really cool with that, again, is I can have 3 different coordinators go into this and want to look at this for different types of things, right? They can compare different sessions, different types of courses. So being able to set that, and again, when you share your dashboard, they can go in and change their filters as well. So a little bit of instruction with that, but then again, one click of your filter is going to affect all of the other elements that you have linked to that filter itself. All right, I think I'm going to toss it back over to Wes to wrap us up. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. So yeah, just to wrap up, we wanted to share some trainings and resources. If you were interested in Airtable or you want to learn more about it, a great place to start, where I started, was just at Career Edge. And they have like a 1.5 hour little training called Learning Airtable, where you go along and build a base along with them. And this might be something to do on your personal account, again, just so you don't have to, you can avoid that fee, I guess. The ASU Slack channel, Airtable-users-community, is a great place too. So there's just tons of people that I would say are more like Airtable enthusiasts, kind of like me, that will help you with those workarounds or help you with some really complicated process if you can't figure something out. It's just a great place to ask a question. And then just like with everything else, just Googling something in Airtable. You can usually find some official Airtable learning or training, or you're going to be able to find someone's workaround or just their ideas for it. I know we're pushing pretty close to time, but we wanted to open it up for questions. So I'm going to check and see if anyone asks a question on Zoom, if you guys would like to field the questions over there.
Oh. Yeah.
So there's a I think, Shelly, you were talking about like a form, like a front end form, or maybe I misunderstood the process for the term of the day. Is there something where you can create a front end form, people enter information into it and it goes into Airtable?
So honestly, the main thing about Airtable is to create a new record. That is its purpose in life. So when you're updating another table, that's where the pre-fill comes in. That said, creating a form is very simple. Once you've created a record in one of the tables, there's a button that you can create and it automatically creates the form. It gives you room to add images if you want. You can take the fields off. It's the pre-fill that you have to go to an extension, but the creating of the form is really straightforward.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. If you have a question or anything for us, I think we'll be hanging around for a little bit. I don't see any questions on Zoom. So again, we really appreciate everyone coming today and we hope that you, question. So that, I think that kind of goes to, it depends where that data is coming from. So I can give you an example here. I use Airtable to track like installations of different LTIs in a canvas. And so we pull information from, I think it's Tableau, or we pull it from a different, they take the data and it's sent to an Airtable email address. And so you could set that frequency to whatever you want. And so like we get it updated twice a week. And so that data is fresh twice a week. I think if you, through the different connections through Airtable, like I think there's like, what is it, Jira, for example, you can have a direct connection to a Jira program and it will keep that data synced. So it really depends where the data is coming from in terms of like how live or accurate it's going to be. So you have some different options and workarounds there.
So you could have an automation run.
Yep.
So it's not live, but it's updated.
Thank you. That was a great question. Yep. Cool. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. And if you have questions too, feel free to shoot a Slack message or ask on the Airtable user community. And thanks for coming in today.